Hello, my name's Clive Longbottom. I'm founder and chief analyst with Quocirca. I'm here today to talk to James Walker, who's the president of the CloudEthernet Forum. The CEF has now been around for 4 months or so. It's just gone past its 4-month birthday. You've now launched the white paper, which sort of sets out the remit and the aims of the forum. What I'd like to talk about is what we're expecting to see as we go through to your first anniversary, what's going to happen over the next 8 months, and then what's going to happen beyond there as well.
There'll be a huge party, obviously, at the 8-month point, but I think it's great because we've got through that piece, as you said, of getting the white paper launched and getting the members involved and putting something collaboratively together. So now we've set out what we want to do, and the piece is actually doing the work and getting the members involved in answering the questions that have been posed in the white paper. So I expect to see a lot of that activity now start up. I think there's a lot of different lead times for different types of activity. So we may find that some of the questions that are posed are actually quite fundamental and need a lot of work to be done, and those are going to take a long time to do. But a long time can't be too long a time in this market. It's got to be still quite rapid. So early stages are getting recommendations, best practices, white papers, that sort of thing. Longer term is what can we do that's more fundamental to maybe changing the protocol, hopefully not, or changing equipment or vendor roadmaps. Those take a little bit longer.
So James, when we look at whether you're going to be a standards body or whether you're going to be best practices or create something different, when you look at what's happening around here, you've got SNEER looking at the storage side of things. You've got other ones who are looking at the network side through things like SDN. All of this lot are all working away quite hard to try and make this whole lot work together. Are you just going to try and embrace all of these, or are you going to come up with your own standards, change the Ethernet protocol to try and make the whole thing work together?
I don't think there's any sense in doing things in isolation. I think this is an industry where we have to work together. I think for us, we're looking at, can we remove obstacles that make Ethernet difficult to use or influence other pieces of work, such as in some cases storage and in some cases indeed control planes and so on, as you mentioned them. I don't think it makes any sense for us to want to start building a parallel protocol to Ethernet that somehow better meets our needs. It's much better to work with what is there in place and do what we can to modify it. It's interesting, some of the players that you mentioned, several of those have approached us in one form or another to say, what are you doing in this space, or is there something we can contribute, or is there something that we can do for you, or is there something you can do for us? All of those sorts of things are in play. So that's, for me, somewhat of a parallel activity to what we're doing now. We have our 3-4 main objectives to achieve in the immediate short term, and those will go on, and those will be the main focus of the technical committee. The rest of it is kind of the outreach which the marketing and operations group is doing to work with new interested members, new interested companies, new interested forums about where we define our relationship. So in some cases we've reached out to forums who are advocating the take-up of cloud and have cloud suppliers as members, and then are now starting to look at the networking piece and how that integrates, so we're very complementary. In some cases it's as you described, organizations that are looking at specific protocols and where we work.
So with a fairly modern data center, we're looking at, there's modular compute in there. It might be something like a VCE vBlock or a UCS or a vStart, a pure flex system. You've also got the networks who's like to be fabric based on something like OpenFlow and SDN. So we're seeing that this could be fairly easy for the CEF to say, yes, we can take a full Ethernet approach here. But when we start looking at something like a private cloud built on an IBM stack, trying to talk to an Azure cloud or an OpenStack cloud or AWS, we're looking at different transports, we're looking at different technologies. Are you going to be saying that let's get rid of all of these different transports, replace them all with Ethernet? Or are you going to be saying, how do we work with them all?
I don't think that we're coming into this and saying it's got to be Ethernet, or even if we were, that would be in opposition necessarily with what these groups are doing. I mean, the fundamental point of interconnect, which is emerging for service providers and cloud service providers, are the latest embodiment of these Ethernet exchanges, which are turning into cloud exchanges, and those always were and remain layer 2 focused. Why is it layer 2? Because it's the right tool for the job. It kind of gets out of the way of all the complicated stuff which goes on over the top of it. And from a service provider point of view, that's what we want to do. We want to logically separate customers from each other, and Ethernet provides a robust mechanism to do that. It also has a lot of OAM and other protocols that run over the top of it that give us a very good view of traffic flows and so on. Unlike a layer 3 environment where we would have to essentially look at parallel paths, would have to look at traffic which is not necessarily actually the traffic which the customer is flowing. So for me, layer 2 is already established in that function, and what we're doing is we're building on that. We're not proposing a competitive view or an opposing view to what is already in place.
When we're looking at what's going to be required to make everything work together, we're having to drill down from the layers that are above where you're playing. So the layers above level 3, you're going to be down at level 2. Are you working with the members of the forum to say, this is what an FPGA or an ASIC is going to have to look like, these are the functions it's going to have to provide, sort of an API type standard for them to work against?
I think we're going to eventually get to something along that line, yes. And I think it's going to, whether it's getting down to the point of telling them how to build an ASIC, I don't think that's necessarily what we're going to do. But it's certainly going to be defining the touch points and, if you like, the API that needs to exist between the transport layer and the layers that control it. And they could be as simple as making sure that the transport network can communicate certain things about its attributes. So we've been talking a lot inside the forum about these privacy concerns and constraining private data within regulatory boundaries, or following specific routes for latency reasons or whatever. Being able to communicate that to higher levels, so the geographic location of the network as opposed to just purely its functioning, that's something that doesn't really exist and makes more sense to be done as, if you like, as a signal, or something signaled through an API, as opposed to creating a whole new protocol.
As we're looking at the different workloads that are going to be required to be dealt with here, we need service level agreements across end to end. Now, we can do this when we're looking at various bits of tooling from an end user using an application which is based somewhere else. But underpinning all of that, there's the physical side of things, and when you're looking at Ethernet, it can be quite chatty. There can be things in there which you just can't control or manage in the same way as you can the application performance, badly written applications themselves. So are you going to be looking at putting in place a means of monitoring, measuring and controlling technical SLAs? Yeah,
so one of the things that's so attractive about Ethernet as a transport from a carrier point of view, and why it's been so successful as it's evolved into carrier Ethernet, is that the set of OAM tools are very broad and they cover a very wide range of aspects, and they're very good at reporting sort of service quality. You're right that there's something that sits underneath that, which is sort of general Ethernet or transport chat, which doesn't really help either the service provider or the provider of the cloud service in terms of service quality and so on. And in fact, it can become dangerous if there's too much of it, because it starts to squeeze the actual revenue generating traffic. So I think we do need to look at ways to reduce that. It's also not useful when you have a very large number of suppliers interconnecting at a particular point to then flood that point with a whole lot of relatively redundant messaging traffic to do with the protocol, as opposed to actual payload that's being carried between service providers. So the early indications are, yes, we're going to have to look at how to summarize, whether that's summarizing simple things like, well, relatively simple things like ARP, or it's summarizing clusters of VLANs, or virtualized instances of machines, or whatever else it is. We still need to evaluate that, but I think we're heading down that track, yes.
Okay, so let's look at the anniversary. In 8 months' time, we're sat here again. How much will have been done in stone? How much will you have written down saying, yes, this is definitely going to be done? And how much is still on the chalkboard, capable of being rubbed out and forgotten about?
I think that we'll certainly have some broad guiding principles in place that will say these are the boundaries of what we're taking on. And I think that's one of the most important things for us to define in the very immediate term. And we'll see the result of that in 8 months. So we have to deliver within the things that we have decided we're going to do. We have to have delivered some results within that 8-month time frame. There's no doubt about it. If we're going to take a year and a half to deliver a standard, the market will have gone beyond that point. So in 8 months' time, I'll be very happy with some standardization of approach amongst vendors. And when I say vendors, I don't just mean network equipment vendors. I mean service providers and carrier neutral data center providers and so on, in terms of how we choose to interface with each other. I think also what that discussion will have done is spun off a very important piece, which is around the operational management end-to-end from a customer's point of view. So from virtual machine within their environment to virtual machine within a distant environment. And I suspect that out of that there comes some commercial question. Who's going to be responsible for what? And how much visibility can I get into your network? Those sorts of questions I think will be quite a lot in play. As to what could be changed, I think the market is enormously dynamic. I think that the things we've identified have to be fixed no matter what. So I don't really have on my plate something where I'm thinking that's an optional piece. We do have a wide variety of things that members and other companies have brought to us and said, please look at these. Some of those will get put into the priority list, some of those won't.
Okay. James Walker, President of the CEF, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.